Hello and welcome to Follow Me and Die. I'm Larry, and today we have the first episode of a new series, Roll20 for the Absolute Beginner. Today we'll begin with how to get started for the GM. So first we go over to roll20.net. Once we're there, we'll be at this page, and we have the option here to create our free account. You create that just like any other account you create online. You give them your name, your email address, and a password. You indicate whether or not you want to get the newsletter, and you agree to the term of services, and you create your account. And the sign in, you just come in and you put your email and password, and you get signed in. So I'll pause a moment to get signed in, and then we'll continue. So once you're signed in, you'll be on the home page, and for my account, it's showing recent games, which are all the games that I either run as a GM or playing as a player, and the 6 most recent games that I've been in. Then there's a View All Games button that shows if you've got more than 6. Up to the top right, it'll show you the name you're signed in under and your type of account. For me, it's a free account, how long I've been a member, and all the hours I've played in Roll20. Under the username, you'll be able to get to your account, and under your account, it'll show you your profile, your email address, your type of account, and the danger zone in red, delete my account. Click that if you want to lose everything that you've got. And then you can set your preference for language, how much email you want, and a photo for your account, and you can change your password. Then you can see your profile, which will show your public profile looks like. Under achievements, these are all the different badges that get unlocked when you do achieve certain things, such as you've played with 5 people, 10 people, 25 people, you've added your avatar picture, you've got a full profile page, how many hours you've played, how many dice you've rolled in game, you have a spot for your bio, what games you want to play, what you're seeking a group for if you're a game master. And on the player directory, you can opt out. If you opt out of the player directory, nobody's going to be able to find you. It'll then show the people you've recently played with, what their handles are, and then you can see your messages, topics you follow. Give a gift subscription. If you're a player, that's a really handy thing to give to your GM, because as a player, the level of account the GM has gives the player that level. So if you're a player that's a paid subscription but the GM is free, you only have the tools and capabilities of the free account. And then you have a private message inbox. So there are messages. The little full envelope up here indicates if you have messages, and you can message people within Roll20. If you're a player, you can just go to join a game, and the GM can send you a link that you can click to get into the game. If you're a GM and you're a brand new GM and you want to start a game, you click Create New Game. Then you can give your game a name and then tags. You can choose a character sheet if it's a game for which they have a character sheet. Right now I'm going to leave it none, because one of my upcoming videos will be about how to create a basic character sheet for a game that doesn't have a character sheet. Then you can choose a module. Modules would be things that you can purchase from the marketplace. Purchase it and it'll have all the monsters and things set ready to go. Once you're ready to start, you click I'm ready, and it will create your game. You'll get the Roll20 loading screen. On the free account, there's a 15-second delay while you wait for that to come up. Right where it says you will join the game shortly, it usually offers to have a tutorial, which you really want to use that tutorial. I've turned off the tutorial in my account, so let's go back and I'll show you where you can find the tutorial if you've managed to turn it off in yours. Under the Games menu, Tutorial. That's the first thing on this list. I highly recommend you go over the tutorial. It'll go into much greater detail and explain things that I won't be touching in this series of videos. Now, once you've got your game created, you can edit how the game appears to others, and you can join the game. So let's go and look at what the options are for editing the game. You can choose a file and drop that in there, and it will give you a main image for your game. You can choose your game. Let's just choose Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. That's happens to be my go-to game. When your next game will be, you can set a day and a time. You can enter a description. You can post a new topic. You have a chat archive. Looking for players is when you want to publicize your game so that other users of Roll20 can find it. Don't do that while you're still building your campaign. Advertise you're looking for players when you're actually ready to play. Under game settings, things that are grayed out are not an option if you're not a paid user. However, you can allow players to import characters. There's a vault, which is different information that you have, and the free account has a smaller amount of space available than there are game default settings. Access compendium in game. So if you have one of the character sheets, such as D&D 5th edition or Pathfinder, you can get at a compendium that's in the game. Character sheet template, you can change that. Right now we're going to start with none. And then once you've made all your changes, you click Save Changes, and you can go back to your game. Other settings you can work with are Copy Game. Copy Game is useful if you want to run the same campaign for multiple groups of players. Clear the chat archive. There is a chat archive within each campaign, and if you want to clear that out so that you can start fresh, you can do that. Finally, there's Delete Game. If you delete the game, all the information you worked so hard to put into that will be gone. So those are the main settings that you can change after the game. On the right, it'll tell you who created it, how many players, and you can invite players. But of course, you don't want to invite players until you're ready to actually start play. Now that we have created our game and joined the game after editing the settings to the game, this is what we'll see. Down here will be the player. The GM is considered a player. It will show the icon the player may have associated with their account, and then their name on their account, and a color. If you don't want to be orange or whatever color it assigns, you can change it, and that will be your color. Then you will see the default page for the grid is what is called the token layer. The token layer is the layer that the players can interact with. It will hold icons that are called tokens that represent characters, NPCs, monsters, and perhaps objects. And the players will be able to move the tokens the GM has given them control of. The GM can interact with anything on any layer. The GM, in addition to having access to the token layer, has access to two other layers. We'll talk about those as we talk about the tabletop toolbar. By default, the tabletop toolbar starts off with the select option, which is this little pointer, and that allows selecting the different items on the different levels. The pan view changes to a hand and allows one to drag the view of the layer around, so players can change their own view however they want. It doesn't affect any other player. One key is if you want to interact with something, make sure it's on the pointer. I make that mistake quite frequently, forgetting to change the toolbar back to the pointer, no matter what I'm on. Next is the objects and tokens layer by default, and it allows you to see the other layers. The little graphic for objects and tokens is a picture of a cube or a die. Maps and background looks like a map pin. That allows a background image such as a map or uh, artwork or something else that you want to see, and the token layer will have the grid over the top of that. So if it was a map of a dungeon or some other area, there would be a grid over that map. Players will be able to see the map in the background, but they can't change what's on the map in the background. The GM info overlay, that's the GM layer. That is a layer that only the GM can see. So the GM can put things like monsters, NPCs, treasure, notes, traps, anything that the GM does not want the players to see can be put on that layer and then can be brought forward to the map layer or the token layer if the players will be interacting with it. And again, make sure you always change back to the object and token layer if you want to, as GM, be able to control what's on the token layer. It can be very difficult if you put a token on the wrong layer and then you can't move it. So you always want to make sure that you're on the right layer. The paintbrush indicates the art functionality. The magnifying glass controls the size of things. So if you want to change the size to be smaller, the grid gets smaller, or you can make it bigger. Another option for changing the size of the grid is this little slider bar here that changes the size of the grid. And that changes the view for the individual who is signed in. So as GM, you can change it and it won't change for your players. Your players have control of how they view the game. Next is the measurement tool that looks like a ruler. By default, a gridded page has 5-foot squares. So when you drag it, it goes from the center of one square to the center of another square and shows how far it is. As GM on each page, if you wish, you can actually turn off the measurement so your players cannot measure how far apart squares are if you, for some reason, don't want them to know. The I button is for settings related to fog of war. Fog of war controls how much of the map the players can see at any given time. That we'll go into details on that in another video. The clock is the turn order. So when you have tokens for players and monsters and you have an initiative situation, you can specify the turn order and that will help you cycle through whose turn it is. It's a tool that's available but not required that you use it. Next is the die roller with a button looking like a D20. The basic rolls will be the standard dice. If you need a die of a different size, you'll then either have to type it in manually each time, or to save time, build a macro for that. We'll talk about other sizes of dice and how to roll those in a future video. Advanced rolls let you control how many dice you roll. So if you wanted to roll 2d20 with -1 to the roll, you could do that, and it will show up down here. You can see what the roll is and interpret it however you wish. If you're on a different one of these tabs over here and have a roll, you'll get a noise and the chat icon will turn blue, letting you know something has happened, and you can come back and see what it is. If, for example, you're a player looking at something on the journal tab and get away from that. You also have options for exploding dice and controlling target numbers, and the last 10 rolls will show up and are available for a re-roll. Finally, under the dice roller are help. There's help and docs, which will take you to the Roll20 help and wiki pages. I highly recommend that you go to those. The shortcuts reference will pop up the basic shortcut reference unless you enable under the settings or advanced keyboard shortcuts. That's handy if you can't remember what a shortcut is. Lastly, there is a report a bug feature. I recommend you not report a bug unless you are sure it's a bug and that it has not already been reported. Next is the page toolbar. This button here controls the page. By default, you'll have one page. It's called Start. The red players flag indicates that's where the players are and what they can see. So if you have a super secret page that you've created and you don't want the players to see it, make sure you haven't moved the player's flag to that page on the page toolbar, and also make sure you've not moved an individual player to that point. If you move an individual player to that point, only that player can see it. It's handy to keep that in mind if you're working on your campaign between sessions. Players can sign in at any time, and if you don't want them to see what you're looking on, make sure they're on your start page. On the page toolbar, you can click the name of the page and change it and press enter to save the name. You can click the page settings. By default, the page is 25 units by 25 units, and then a unit is defined by the scale. It is a default of 5 feet. You can change the number 5 to any number you wish, and you can change feet to meters, kilometers, miles, inches, centimeters, etc. The background we have right now is white. We can change it to any of these colors. Any changes that we make will not be visible until we click OK. The grid is enabled. If you want to turn off the grid, you can uncheck it. If it is checked, the size is by default of 1 unit. You can change the size of the grid to be multiple units, so you have 2 units that are each 5 feet, so being a square would be 10 feet. The diagonals, by default, are compatible with 4th edition D&D, but then there's also options for 3.5 edition D&D Pathfinder, Euclidean, and Manhattan. The default type is square, but you can also have vertically aligned hexes or horizontally aligned hexes. You can show labels if you're using hexes. This is the color of the grid line. Right now they're gray. You could change them to any color. You could make them red or black. You also have the ability to control the opacity of the grid lines. That is how dark or light or visible they are. You have the option to enable Fog of War. That again controls what players can see on the map that they are currently on. The GM opacity controls the GM layer. So if you want the GM layer to be more or less invisible to avoid distracting yourself, or have it more pronounced so you don't forget that something's there. The play on load is for the jukebox feature, which is non-functional. Archive page, so if you have a map of a dungeon and the players have pretty much explored that or not planning on coming back, you can archive it for later. If you're sure it's a map you'll never use again, like it's a treasure map that's been burned, you can delete the page and it's gone forever. Once you've made any changes, you click OK to save it, and then it will display your changes. To make new pages, you click the Create Page. It'll give it a name of Untitled, and then you can change the name to whatever you want. If you want to duplicate a page, click this icon and it'll give it with a name copy, and you can change the name. When you're done working with a page, you click the page toolbar and it gets it out of your way. Next to the page toolbar is the size slider that we talked about. Then there's the position slider, so it will take you vertically up and down the map. If your map is wide enough, you'll have a horizontal slider that you can slide back and forth. You can change to the pan view and get that dragged where you can see it. Again, each individual within Roll20, whether they're a player or the GM, has control of the orientation of the map. GM has an option to ping. The way you ping is you have to have the select option selected, and you press and hold. It will make a ping like the radar ping, and it will be in the color on the player name down below. So since mine is the dark blue, the ping is a dark blue. Do a shift ping and it will center that for all players so that they see what you're talking about if the player can't find it for some reason. But that will not change the size of the map that is displayed for the player. Finally, there's the sidebar. The sidebar, when we first sign in, will show view all chat entries for the game. And because I was in attempting to make a recording, I have multiple roles. If there are no roles, you would not see that. It would immediately be followed by the Welcome to Roll20. This will be a link that will take you to all the chat entries. All the chat entries all the way to the beginning of the campaign will be available. If for some reason you want to go back and look at them, you can do that if there's a dispute or a question about something that happened. Next is the Welcome to Roll20. That is a section that will be visible to players and GM alike. It'll start off with how to do a chat, type it in and press enter, how to roll dice, different formulas for dice, how to do a GM roll. A GM roll will be a die roll that is only visible to the player that entered it and the GM. If the GM does a GM roll, only the GM can see it, so that would be good for secret rolls. Finally, there's Whisper, which allows one player to whisper to another so no one else knows what they're talking about, or a GM can whisper to a player and a player can whisper back to the GM for a secret discussion about who's the new werewolf among the group or whatever, what have you. Next is a section that is only visible to the GM, and that's the player link. If you hover over that, it'll display the link that you can copy and email to the people you want to invite to your game. So if people hit you up on Roll20 and they're interested, you can send them the link and they'll be able to get in your game. If you have people that you are friends with online and you want them to join in your game, you can email them the link. They'll click on the link. If they have an account, it'll take them right into the game. If they don't have an account, they'll have to sign up first, and then it'll take them into the game. Once they're in the game, you'll then be able to assign them a character sheet and a token for that character sheet, and then they'll have basically a miniature associated with a character sheet that they can operate within your game. Then there will be the chat window down here. This will let you type in anything and press enter, and it will send it to everybody unless you do a whisper. You don't have to press enter. You can just type your text and click the send button. The as down below, right now there is just myself and a character I created in a prior recording attempt. I could deliver a message as that character I created. Next is the art library. That is only available to the GM of the game. You can search for tokens, maps, tiles, and textures, portraits, or everything. If you're searching for tokens, you can type in goblins and it'll show you goblins. If they're in your library, you'll see them in your library. If they're free assets, you'll see free assets. Note the My Library option carries across from game to game. Every game for which I am GM, My Library is available. So if I delete it from one game, I delete it from all games. So keep that in mind. If you want to search for maps, you can type in dungeon or tower or mountain, whatever you want, different kinds of tiles or textures, portraits, and the help button will help you figure out how to do a search for specific things. So marketplace purchases, since I've not purchased anything, that would be if you found a particular image that had a fee in order to purchase it for use, would show up here. Free assets are all the different things that are available at no charge. You can select them, such as this individual caveman with a stone axe, and that is now a token on the board that we can move. The singular square out here, once it's selected, allows you to change its orientation. You can change its size, and there are other settings that become available when you click on it. They will go into details later. Under My Library, for example, I can upload images or I can add things. I have, for example, under the Monsters folder, subfolders with different categories of monsters. I highly recommend that when you start adding art and tokens and maps to your collection or your library, that you organize it as you go. I did not do that, and I just said, oh, that looks cool, and added a bunch of stuff to my library, and then it was a mess, and it took me a long time to get it cleaned up. So I highly recommend that you organize it as you go. Again, the players can't see any of this unless you drag it to the token layer where they can see it. The players can't move it or interact with the token unless you give that individual player control of it. Next is the journal. To start with, this will be blank. If you have journals that already exist, you can search for them by a tag or by a name. You can add characters, handouts, and folders. I added a character, and it automatically will pop up like so when it does that, and it gives it a name. Let's add another character to show you what I'm talking about. So here's a new character. It's given it a new name, and if I want to keep it, I can hit Save Changes. If I want to change anything about it, I can. If I want to archive it to get it out of the way but not get rid of it, I can archive it and it'll be out of the way, but I can bring it back. If I make a character for some reason that I want to duplicate, I can make a copy of it. And if it's gone and never to return, I can delete it. Then you can also create a handout, which the default is a mysterious note. You can indicate which player it'll show up in. I'm the only quote player in the game as GM. I already see it as GM. When you have another player join, you can associate a journal with a specific player. So only that player can see it, or all players can see it. You can control who can edit it. So if it's something you want all your players to see but not edit, you definitely would not give your players the ability to edit something like that. You can put tags on it to help group it however you want. You can drop a file on it, a picture of a person, an object, a map, whatever picture you want. And then you can have description. There's some basic formatting you can do to it. You can have GM notes so you don't forget anything. Again, you can archive the handout just like you could the character sheet. If the handout's gone forever, you can delete it. Like say you give them an image of a treasure map and it gets destroyed, you can delete it unless for some reason you want to save it. Whatever changes you make, you can save those changes and you'll have a mysterious note. When you click on a note, or other journal, it'll just pop up. There's a feature on all of these available to the GM called Show to Players. Right now, only the GM can see it. Clicking Show to Players, if there were players in the game, would make that object show up to everybody all at once. And then people could look at it at their leisure. Then also make folders to put things in. So previously I made a handouts folder so we can move our mysterious note under handouts, and we can move this other character under characters, and that way you can close the folder and get more real estate on the screen so it's not overflowing. I recommend that you try to keep on top of that. Players can only see those journal items and handouts that have been shared with that player. So a character sheet is considered a handout. So for example, you would only give control of a character sheet to the player who has that character. And that way not everybody has that character on their list and it's something for them to wade through and minimize clutter. The jukebox is non-functional. Collections, this is where you can have macros that will do dice rolls. They will show text, other things. Next are decks. The default one is a standard deck of 52 cards. Rollable tables, that allows you to add tables for rolling anything on a table. Finally, there's the settings. Up at the top, when you are a GM of a game, you are signed in as the GM, but you can click this button and it will show you what your game looks like from the player's perspective. So only the things that the player can see will be visible. We'll go into more detail in each of those settings at a future date. I will point out that by default, video and voice within Roll20 is enabled. So you don't need any third-party applications like Skype, Hangout. So for now, we're just going to stick with what can you do within Roll20. More advanced topics will be for another time in another place. So those are the basics of the game. We'll be coming back and touching on each piece in more detail. So that's all for now. Thanks for watching today. If you found this video helpful, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any suggestions for other topics for the absolute beginner, please share them in the comments below. And if you're looking for more advanced topics on using Roll20, check out Cody Lewis' YouTube channel Taking 20 and his Roll20 Masters series. There's a lot of really cool stuff in there. You can find me on social media via my blog, G+, Facebook, and Twitter. I also have a Cafe Press store if you'd like to buy one of the shirts or hoodies with my logo on it to help support the channel. Please do so. All the links for those are down below. And just remember, with my sites, you don't have a choice because it's follow me and die.